Now, OK, let's see what my panel make of this. I have the wonderful Mike Parry and Jonathan Schneider with me. I'm going to come to you, James Schneider. I'm going to come to you first, Mike, on this one. What do you make of what you've just heard?
Well, you know, I just can't get it. I'm very disappointed in Wes Streeting for pulling back on this and suggesting that, oh, you know, if you get too excited and if you start focusing on the most horrific crime I can remember in my lifetime as a journalist, which is nearly 50 years, believe it or not, I can't remember a mass crime like this. You know, old men raping and bodily damaging young white girls because they were young and white. I just can't get it. I mean, Wes Streeting to suddenly say, it could end up in a situation like New Zealand where a man attacked 2 mosques and shot a load of Muslim people. That guy was a one-off nutter, right? So to try and drag that out of the history books and say it could happen here, I'm very, very disappointed. The problem is Labour are intent on that you shouldn't mention the M-word, Muslim, you shouldn't mention the P-word, Pakistan, because they know, and I think this is the greatest accusation that can be made against Labour. You pointed out the statistic that 80% of Muslims vote Labour, or did before Gaza, right? So I'm using your own figures here. But what I'm saying is we know they fear losing Muslim constituencies because in the last general election, they lost 4 to independents who went on a pro-Palestinian lobby, OK? And including Jonathan Ashworth in Leicester East.
And Wes Streeting was one of those.
And Wes Streeting. So what I'm saying is they are very, very frightened of upsetting Muslim communities. I think on this show 2 or 3 days ago, not this show, but on this station, Simon Danzuk, right, the former Labour MP, he actually said that on one occasion when it was being debated in the Commons, a senior Labour official came to him just before he entered the chamber and said, don't mention ethnicity, whatever you do, Simon. They are terrified of raising the real issue. And that, to me, is an horrendous, shocking betrayal of these young girls who've been horrendously attacked and raped.
James.
So I think we should be focused on protecting kids and on getting the fullest amount of justice possible for all of the victims and not advancing the careers of particular politicians. And I think a really long list of them have behaved quite shamefully over the last week and are pushing basically themselves and their own...
Give me an example. Which ones? Name one that you think has behaved appallingly.
Oh, well, I've got quite a long list. I think...
Give me a couple.
OK, I think Kemi Badenoch, for example, who was the children's minister, who was then the women's minister, who didn't call for an inquiry or really raise this issue at all, then trying to pretend that she's at the front of it. I think that's pretty shameful. I think the Home Secretary, at the time where the J inquiry landed on the desk that has a whole set of recommendations, which was Suella Braverman coming out and saying some nonsense about deporting foreign criminals, which you can do anyway if you're the Home Secretary. I think both governments who haven't brought forward any of the recommendations, as far as I can see, from that inquiry, which was started in 2022, landed on the Home Secretary's desk in the summer of 2023. Lots of very good things in that, like mandatory reporting if someone tells somebody that they have been a victim of it. But
very little focus on this issue that we're talking about.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Right. Within that report, there are lots of things that would very much help with this issue. The key one for me is setting up a child protection agency. And I think the child protection agency, which should have on it people like Jane Senior, whistleblower in the Rotherham case, and so on and so forth, people who know what they're talking about, not, because I have zero trust in them at all, the politicians who are currently trying to make hay for themselves. And to be honest, this...
You would include both Labour and Conservative politicians in that, would you? I mean, for example, Jess Phillips took 4 months to respond which I think is so strange and tone deaf. Totally. I also think this Farage attack on Streeting again is not dealing with the issue at hand. I mean, firstly, what Wes Streeting said, Farage's claim is that conceals reality.
Streeting hasn't said conceal reality. It's like the way in which this is spoken about, which is quite right. We saw only a few months ago when something was presented as being something it wasn't in Southport, what chain of events that set up.
We can't discuss the Southport case because it's still a live case, obviously.
Fine, but the racist violence, the attacks on mosques, all that stuff that happens. So, of course, the way in which you talk about things is important. But the most important thing that we should be talking about, which none of the politicians really seem to be doing so at all, is to talk about the solutions. When are these recommendations, which, like mandatory reporting, most important one, Child Protection Agency, and a single statistical information so that we can actually see. So rather than, Mike might make one claim and I might make a counter claim about, for example, ethnic background, whatever it might be, the data is actually collected, so then we can know. But that's not what they're talking about. They're scoring political points.
Well, James, this whole story is taken on new oxygen because of an investigation by this very station, GB News. So you can't look back historically and say she didn't do that, he didn't do that. It's been reignited. And what we're looking for is a response from politicians on both sides of the House since it got reignited by the GB News investigation, which has blown the whole thing apart, and it's much worse than any of us ever thought. So what we want now is sensible politicians to say action this day, and Wes Streeting is trying to put the lid on that.
Look, I'm no fan of Wes Streeting. I don't really think it's fair to say he's trying to put the lid on it, but I agree with you. I haven't heard any of them say on either side, here are these list of very reasoned, well worked out from an expert who has also done a previous inquiry into Rochdale, who knows what she's talking about. These are the recommendations. We've had 18 months. None of this has become law. We haven't passed any statutory instruments or new legislation. Let's write a bill that does this and does this quickly. And then I think, because I don't want the MPs themselves setting up the inquiry, I don't know how they'll do it. I want the Child Protection Agency to do it.
Or on a judge, don't we? An independent judge.
And but with its mandate set by the Child Protection Agency, people whose only responsibility
it's the children.
is to children and victims of this stuff. Because regardless of who's done it and who it's done to, this stuff is absolutely vile, and that needs to be taken with a very high level of seriousness. Why do you think Labour are so against
an inquiry, even in their ability to get the British people to vote for them, in their ability to say to the British people, we cover big issues? They put the Battle of Orgreave into their election manifesto. The Battle of Orgreave was between coal miners and the NUM and the police 40 years ago. They said we're going to have an inquiry into the Battle of Orgreave. Nobody cares about the Battle of Orgreave.
Well, some people do care about the Battle of Orgreave.
Well, very few compared to what's happening here.
But your point is it's not relevant to what we're talking about today. The one thing that worries me, I want to know what you think as well, is that we still have the councils involved in this who are saying that using the phrase Asian grooming gangs is racist. These are the councils who are actually involved in it still. So we're still not facing up to reality of what happened. Now, we give you a government spokesman, their statement on this. The Home Office issued the following. No child should ever suffer sexual abuse or exploitation, and it is paramount we do more to protect vulnerable children, which is why we are working at pace across government to drive forward real action. And in letters responding to Oldham Council, Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips has said that she understands the strength of feeling and that a further inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Oldham should be undertaken. Phillips added that she was very sorry for the delay in responding to both of the executive's letters. But she said that she believed it is for Oldham Council alone to decide to commission an inquiry into child sexual exploitation locally rather than the government to intervene. What